Hey everybody, welcome to Memorial Road. Hope you're doing well. I want to make you aware of a really great resource we have online. So in 3 weeks, we've been talking about an event for quite a while called Facing Doubt, a conversation with Lee Strobel. And to back up a little bit, a few months ago I preached a sermon, and the whole point of the sermon was that we should be praying for open doors, because that's what Paul does in Colossians chapter 4. And so we've been doing that quite a bit over the last few months, and we've prepared a digital invitation kit. And the point of this is to help you take that next step in inviting people to our event, which is just a few weeks away. Now, I'll tell you what the digital kit's about in just a minute, but I also want you to know we do still have our paper copies as well of invitation cards, and they're at the exits and Information Central. But let me tell you a little bit about this digital kit. Andy Lashley and several people from our church family have been working on this for several weeks. And so when you go to mrcc.org/StrobelKit, you'll see this page, and we have 12 members who have put together videos, and each video is a quick 60 to 90 second invitation that you could post then on your social media page, or you could email it to somebody. So just so you can get a sample of what they look like, we're going to play the one from Cassie Sykes, if you'll go ahead and play that video.
It feels like it's easy for some people to believe in something that they can't see. But for others of us, that kind of belief is really hard. You look around and see children dying of cancer and earthquakes and school shootings, and you think, how could there possibly be a God? And if he does exist, then why does he just sit there and let things happen? But we shouldn't be afraid of these kinds of questions. In fact, I think we should shine a light at them. When we have a place to talk about our doubts, they seem far less intimidating and scary. So I'd like to invite you to an event that's happening in the OKC area on Saturday, February 8th. It's called Facing Doubt, a conversation with Lee Strobel. Lee is a world-renowned New York Times best-selling author who spent much of his life traveling the world trying to answer these important questions of faith. He'll be here to share his story and to answer questions that you might have. You're not the only one who's wrestled with these hard questions. A lot of us believe but still have doubts. We're all just trying to make sense of this. I hope you'll join in on the conversation.
So Cassie does a great job in that video, and so there's 11 others just like it. We even have one that's done in Spanish by Abel Maldonado. And so what we'd like you to do is go to this website, and there's going to be an email will go out tomorrow as well, so you can link right up to it. And then look at some of these videos, and then copy and paste the URL onto your social media feeds. And the idea is we don't want anybody in Edmond or Oklahoma City to not know about this event, because we really think it's going to make a difference. And so please look at that either today, or you can look at it tomorrow when you get the email. I also want to let you know about one more thing, that many of you have shared stories with us about the people you're inviting to this event, and that's been really encouraging. And we thought that it'd be also pretty encouraging for the entire church if we could hear some of those stories. And so we're inviting anybody that wants to be part of a video shoot, and this is going to happen at 2 times. One, it's going to be this coming Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., so right around where we have our Bible class period. And then secondly, it'll happen 1 week from today, from 7:45 in the morning to 12:30, so all in the morning time block where we normally do our service. And it's going to be a very simple video shoot. It's a camera that'll be set up in the north end of the main foyer back there. And here's all we're asking. We just want you to come up to that camera, and we're talking one sentence. Like, you look at the camera and you say, well, I invited Billy, and I invited my coworker. That's all we want you to do, because later in a few weeks we want to play that video for the rest of the church, and we think that'll be really encouraging, so we can hear who we are inviting. So, video shoot invitation, and then also the digital invitation kit. So I'm in this is week 2 in a series called Finding Faith. About 6-7 months ago, there's a guy named Joshua Harris, and he made the news. So this guy, years and years ago, probably 15, maybe even 20 years ago, he wrote a book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And it was a really, really well-received book, sold millions of copies. When I was in youth ministry, I used this book because it was a book about how to do relationships according to the Bible. Well, the reason that Joshua Harris made the news recently is really for two reasons, but the first reason was he got divorced, and that made the news because you got this guy who wrote a book on Christian relationships, and now he's getting divorced. But the second reason that he made the news was even more stunning. Joshua Harris completely abandoned his faith. And this guy, he's not only a prolific author, but he was also preacher at a large 3,000-member megachurch. And he just walked away, abandoned it all, publicly denounced his faith in God. And so there was a lot of different reactions when this story came out. One reaction from Christians was a lot of Christians were just sad, just kind of upset, frustrated. There was one group of Christians that was pretty angry, and there was this counter movement, this counter outcry online from these Christians, which proclaimed that we have got to stop worshiping Christian celebrities. They're just normal people, they're flawed people, and so they got really upset about that. But there was another reaction, and you didn't see this reaction in the news, you didn't even hear about it, because this reaction, it wasn't public, but it did happen in the hearts of individual people. And here's this reaction. These people didn't feel anger, they felt invited. They heard this story and thought, well, if Joshua Harris left his faith, and he's a church leader, he's an author of all these books, I wonder if I should do the same thing. In fact, this caused a lot of people to ask those I wonder kind of questions. Questions like, well, wouldn't it be better if I just walked away? Wouldn't it make my life easier? Wouldn't I feel less guilt if I just abandoned religion altogether? Wouldn't it make life simpler? It sure would make my Sunday morning simpler, because then I wouldn't have to wake up. And then if I walked away from faith, well then it'd be easier because I wouldn't have to answer all these hard questions like difficult things to explain in the Bible. Or questions about suffering, like maybe if I just do what Josh Harris did and I just walked away, maybe my life would get a lot easier. There's a lot of people who ask those kinds of questions. And the truth be told, a lot of people have made that journey away from faith towards a worldview where they don't believe in a God. And part of the reason that more and more we see that people are making this shift away from faith is because of this rise of what we call the new atheists. And these are people in the last 15, 20 years, people like Richard Dawkins, people like Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and these people, they're not just disbelieving in God, they are very aggressively attacking the Christian faith. And so they've come up with quite a few books, and people are reading these books, and so we've seen this slow migration from a lot of people away from church, away from God, away from faith. And so a lot of Christians are thinking, well, what do you do about that? Because some of these people that are moving away from faith, they're not necessarily doing it because they're angry or they're upset. Some of them are just, you know what, I'm done with it. And they move on and they just work and they live their life and they don't seem to need God anymore. And the rest of us are wondering, well, what do you do about that? And so this particular sermon today is in some ways different than any sermon I've ever preached. This is going to be much more of an Acts 17 sermon, not necessarily an Acts 2 sermon. And there's going to be some of you in the audience, you're going to hear some things I'm going to say, and you're going to think, this is weird. What's Phil talking about? Especially like kids in the room. I'm not going to say anything like crazy, but if you're wondering what I'm talking about, you might need to ask mom or dad later why I'm giving this kind of a sermon. But this sermon is really based on this one idea. A lot of people think that when you move away from faith, that you move to this neutral territory with no assumptions, no beliefs, no principles. And I'm here to say that that's just not true. So I've been shaped in the last several years by great thinkers, great writers. And so a lot of what I'm about to say has been shaped by people like Tim Keller, people like Andy Stanley, other Ravi Zacharias. In fact, I listened to a sermon 5 years ago by Stanley about the assumptions that unbelievers have, and that planted a seed for what I'm about to share with you today. And so let me begin with this thought, and Keller says this, Stanley says this, but here's just a good phrase to think about. every step you take away from faith, or really away from anything, is really a step towards something else. So when you get in your car, when you're driving away from your home, you don't just drive into neutral territory, you're going somewhere. You're going to work, you're going to school, you're going to the store. And so some people think that they can easily just step away from faith and their life's going to be simple and it's going to make sense. But that's not the case. When you step away from faith, you're actually stepping towards something else. There are beliefs that are associated with unbelief. And so some of you, maybe someday you're going to have some doubts, you're going to struggle, and some of you might walk away from faith someday. And I can't stop you. Nobody can stop you. That's your choice. But all I want to do today is I want you to know what you're walking into. I just want you to know that some of the assumptions that you will make if you choose to step away from faith. And so here's the first one. If you choose to step into a world where there's no God, then the first thing you need to realize is this: there is no such thing as a mind. A mind would simply be just an illusion. I mean, if you think about this, so a completely atheistic worldview holds the idea that all you are is biology, and all you are is chemistry. In fact, physically speaking, 99% of your body is made up of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus. That's what you are. So when you choose to adopt this world view where there's no God, then you're a piece of carbon, you swirl around for a while, and then you're absorbed back into the dirt. There's no mind, there's no conscience, there's no soul. Even your personality is really just a collision of atoms in your brain. So none of that really exists. It's just an illusion. You are just biology. That's all you are. In fact, so Christopher Hitchens, he fully believed this. He's an atheist, very famous atheist. He got cancer. He wasn't doing well. He's in the hospital. And doctors kept coming in and they said things to him like they'd say to anybody. They said things like, well, your body's rejecting this medicine, and your body's trying to fight this off, and your body's doing this, and your body's doing that. And this really bothered Dr. Hitchens because as an atheist, he didn't believe he had a body. He believed that he was a body. And so one day he just looked at the doctors and he wrote this down in a book. He said, I eventually said to my doctors, I do not have a body, I am a body. You can go to the next slide to read this quote. I eventually said to my doctors, I do not have a body, I am a body. Because that's what he believed. And so if you choose to walk away from God into this world view, you have to accept the fact that you are just a piece of carbon, and your wife is just a piece of carbon, and your teenagers are just pieces of carbon with attitude. Like that's all that you are. You're just biology and chemistry governed by the laws of physics. And here's the irony. For those of you that even right now that you're struggling with your belief and you're not necessarily sure if there really is a God, you don't know, you doubt. Well, let's just say for a moment that it's true. Let's just say there's not a God. Let's just say that we are pieces of rock walking around. Here's the irony. You don't want to be treated like a piece of rock. If you go to Walmart today and you get robbed, you're not going to say, well, that's just what happens in a world governed by biology and chemistry. You're going to get angry. And the reason you're going to get angry is because you want to be treated like a person. You want to be treated like there's a you inside. You want to be treated like you have a self. And yet it is strange because the very worldview of atheism denies that such a thing exists. Your worldview, if you're an atheist, denies the very existence of the self that you would like other people to value. And speaking of value, here's the second belief of unbelief, of an unbeliever. If you choose to walk away from faith, then you have to realize that there is no such thing as value. Now, what do I mean by value? Well, we ascribe value to things all the time. That diamond is valuable. That the birthday that I had was valuable. Money is valuable. This person is valuable. But if there is no God, and we're all just biology, we're all just carbon, then anytime you say that something is valuable, you just made that up. Or society made that up. Or a church made that up. Or civilization made that up. Or a species made that up. Like there's no such thing as inherent value in a world without God. This means that a boulder and a baby have the same value if you live in a world where there is no God. Here's another atheist named Peter Singer. And I got to give him credit because he holds the view that we're all the same, there is no value, but this is how extreme he takes his view. So he has coined a new phrase called speciesism. And what speciesism is, it's like racism, except it's applied to species. So he thinks it's wrong that people think that they're more valuable than animals. Speciesism. So here's a direct quote from him. He says, "It would be speciesist to claim that it is always more seriously wrong to kill a member of the species Homo sapiens than it is to kill a non-human animal." So again, he has stepped away from faith. He's living in a world where there is no God, and this is the kind of world that you get. You might as well take the life of an infant as step on an ant, because in that worldview, those things are the same. In a world without God, there is no value. And so all I'm saying is, again, I can't decide whether you believe or not, but if you choose to walk away from God and from faith, this is the kind of world that you get. There is no mind. There is no value. Here's another belief of unbelief. If you walk away from God, then you are assuming that something came from nothing. Something came from nothing. So you might have heard about this. This is, in the last few decades, this is just something that's been very well researched, but our universe is expanding, kind of like a balloon. So what scientists are finding is that as time goes on, galaxies and solar systems are getting further and further apart from one another. And so if you go backwards in time, then what you can infer is that the universe had a starting point. So this is the leading theory right now of how we can understand our universe. It's expanding, but if you go back in time, it came from some kind of a beginning. Well, this was not always the dominant theory of the universe. In fact, it's fairly recent as far as history goes. So about 70 years ago, the dominant theory of the universe was called the steady state theory. And the way it went is that when you looked up in the sky and you saw the planets and you saw the stars, it didn't have any kind of a beginning. It was just always there. It was brute fact. There were no edges to the universe. It was not expanding. It was just there. In fact, in the same way that a Christian would believe that God was always just there, the average atheist 70 years ago thought that about the universe. In fact, the leading atheist of the day, a guy named Fred Hoyle, 70 years ago, he was really big on the steady state theory. Well, then there was actually a random priest in Belgium who's also a mathematician and loved science. His name was George Lumet. And he was the first person to postulate this theory that I think that everything's moving apart. And so when he first put this theory forward, guess who didn't like it? Fred Hoyle. Fred Hoyle, the leading atheist of his day, thought the idea was preposterous. Why would anybody say that it's all going apart? In fact, in an interview, Hoyle was talking about this theory and he was completely discrediting it, and he was making a joke, and he said, that would be like saying there was just a big bang. That's the origin of that phrase. And those two words caught on, and everybody started using them. Big bang this, big bang that. And now today, people use that phrase all the time. And the irony is that today, many people use the phrase big bang as an objection to the existence of God. When the reality is the words big bang came from the mouth of an atheist who desperately did not want that to be true. Because he realized that if it did come from a beginning, then that would lend credibility to the idea of a beginner. Something created this. And since that time, there's been so many studies that have confirmed this idea that the universe is indeed expanding. And so all this to say, what this means is that if you choose to walk away from God, then you're adopting a worldview that says all of this came from nothing. What's super interesting is I've tried to get into the theories of, well, people that don't believe, what do they say about where this all came from? And what's really interesting is that there is no unified theory about why it's all here. In fact, so Richard Dawkins, the single leading atheist in the world today, here's what he says about the origin of the universe. He says this: the cosmology is waiting on its Darwin. Now, what he means by that is cosmology is a fancy word for the study of the origin of the universe. So the study of the origin of the universe is waiting on its Darwin. And so that second part of the phrase means that Charles Darwin's the guy that came along and he proposed the theory of evolution. And so Dawkins is saying that, in other words, we don't know how the universe came to be. But we're just waiting on the next new great scientist or the next new theory to explain it. But right now, we don't have a clue. And again, this is the leading atheist in the world who is saying this. And so if you choose to walk away from faith, you're entering into a world that has no idea how it got here, and you have to claim, if there's no God to create it all, then your claim would be, this all came from, well, I guess it came from nothing. And then if I could push the point even just a little bit further, not only did it come from nothing, meaning that every sunset you see and every person that falls in love, and it came from nothing. All that came from nothing. But let me push it a little bit further. Not only did it come from nothing, it developed along the way with no help. Like, let's just say for a moment that somehow it did come into reality without a God. But then now we know that all these things developed from it. There's this immense complexity to life, and now it's not just like we have little cells or little molecules. We've got planets and galaxies and people, and it's so complex. And so if you step into a worldview that says, there's not a God, then you're saying that this went from the horse and buggy to the Ferrari with no intelligence. That's quite a claim, to say that all this just developed just because. It just happened with no intelligence behind it. So I'm going to go back to Richard Dawkins again. So he's got a super high IQ. It's a lot higher than mine, and he's a biologist. His early career before he became famous for attacking Christianity, he's just a really good biologist. So he wrote this book called The God Delusion, and it's known by many people as the seminal work, Attacking Faith. And so he writes this whole book, and most of the book is about, here's what we know about science, and here's what we know about biology, and these are the reasons why we don't need a God anymore. And the idea of God is for weak-minded people who use it as a crutch so that they can get through life. But really, we can be freed from that because now we know everything we need to know through science and don't need a God. I want to read you the climax of his book. He gets to the end, and he's trying to build back excitement into a world that has no creator. And here's his one of the final paragraphs. He says this, think about it. On one planet, and possibly only one planet in the entire universe, molecules that would normally make nothing more complicated than a chunk of rock gather themselves together into chunks of rock-sized matter. Let me pause here. This is the language of the leading atheist in the world. This is how he describes it. They gather themselves together into chunks of rock-sized matter of such staggering complexity that they are capable of running, jumping, swimming, flying, seeing, hearing, and I love this one, capturing and eating other such animated chunks of complexity. Capable in some cases of thinking and feeling and falling in love with yet other chunks of complex matter. Man, next time you go on a date, you just need to read this. I love you, complex chunk of matter. But as I read that, you know what? It's so strange for me because it's almost, and I'm just saying this is how I react to it. I read this and I think it's almost like he's taking God out of the equation, but now he's at the end and he's like, oh, kind of a depressing picture. And so he's trying to put wonder and trying to put awe back into the picture. But it feels so forced. And to be honest, when I read through it, another thing that just comes to my mind is that when we talk about chunks of rock-sized matter jumping and swimming and flying and seeing and then falling in love with other chunks of matter, it almost sounds like an invisible, intelligent designer. It sounds like something is behind that. Now, all I'm saying is you're going to have to make your own choice. And you might have had some big objection towards Christianity or towards faith, and you might have something happen in your life, and you're just like, I just can't get over that. You might have some question about the Bible or some contradiction or something that you can't explain, or you might have seen some form of suffering, and you're like, I don't know if I can believe in a God because of what I've seen. All I'm saying is that when you move away from faith, this is what you get. There's no mind. There's no value. Something came from nothing. It developed with no help. And so here's my question for you, and especially for those of you that you're right on the edge, you're teetering between faith and doubt, you're not sure exactly what to believe, or maybe you've walked away altogether. Here's my question for you. Is that the kind of world that you want? Do you want to be a piece of carbon? Do you want your loved one to have the same value as a mosquito? Do you want virtues like love and justice and forgiveness and mercy to simply be the collision of atoms in your brain? I mean, is this what you really want? See, the truth is, even for people that are questioning and even for the people that are thinking about walking away, you got to admit, you don't want that kind of a world. You want to have value. You want your loved ones to have value, and not just the value that you assign because you made it up. You want this to matter. You want there to be some reason, some significance, some purpose, some greater meaning to life. And I'm telling you, you can have that. There's another way. You don't have to walk away. You can have faith. Faith. Not faith in technology or transportation or medicine or progress, but faith in God. A God who created the world. A God who put his image into mankind so that, yes, we have value because of the God who made us. And yes, this world is amazing and rich and beautiful and mysterious and complicated because it comes from the mind of a creator. You can have that kind of faith. And you don't have to be a weird, eccentric person. You can be a reasonable, intelligent Christian who has faith in something they can't see. So I don't know exactly where you are, and I don't even know exactly what you want to do with this kind of a sermon, but let me just say this to close. I think you have more faith than you realize. Even for those of you that are doubting, and even for those of you in the audience that are skeptical, you have more faith than you realize, because Jesus said this. Jesus says it takes faith the size of a what? A mustard seed. And I am coming more and more to believe that if you go the other way, if you walk away from faith and you go to this world without God, I think it takes faith the size of a mountain to be an atheist. But it takes faith the size of a mustard seed to be a Christian. And so what exactly are you supposed to do with a sermon like this? Let me just suggest one or two things here. First, I really think that this sermon, it requires dialogue. I really encourage you to get with somebody, have a meal this afternoon, meet with your Q group, meet with a friend, a family member, have coffee with somebody this week. You got to talk about these things. These are so important. This gets to the heart of what we believe. So please dialogue about the subject itself. And I would also offer this. There's somebody in the room and you don't have anybody to talk to, and you're dealing with all kinds of doubts and you're not sure what you believe, but you know that if you admit it, like if you admit your doubts to your friend, or if you admit your doubts to your mom or your dad, you're really afraid of what they're going to say, and so you just feel stuck and you feel alone. I am offering myself as a conversation partner. If you don't have anybody to talk to about this kind of subject, I want you to email me this week, and we will find a time. We can get coffee. We can get together. phil.brookman@mrcc.org. Email me, and we can get together, because I don't want you sitting with your doubts without someone there to guide you, someone there to help you. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'd love to hear your story, because my guess is you got a pretty compelling story. Don't let this sermon just sit there. Talk about it with somebody. So we're going to sing a song. If you need something from this church family, we had a great baptism in first service. If you need something, if you want to get baptized, if you want us to pray for you, I encourage you to come tell me about that. Let's stand. Let's sing.